What can you do to players who are part-time? Like, you can't, can you?
Well, I speak about this a lot because I speak for the SFA on the B licence, on their licence, on the role of a part-time manager. You have to just make sure you get the timing right from physical, tactical.
Yeah.
But you've also got to remember they've got to enjoy it as well. You know, they're not on a lot of money, they're coming for work. Some of them have had, some are in offices, some are brickies, whatever it is. Some are, you know, they want to come and enjoy it. So you've got to try and get the balance right, which can be difficult. You've got to also try and get some video work fitted into that as well. So you've got what you have to do really as a part-time manager, the biggest thing is you've got to manage the time well, because you only get the players really for 3.5 hours a week. If you think 40 to 50 minutes of that's on warm-ups and cool-downs, you've only actually got them for 2.5 hours to actually train them, and you've got to get information on the team that you have to work on some things that you feel that your team need to work on. That's either as a collectively as a unit or as an individual. You've also got to try and get them analysis into the team that they're going to come up against, things that we've got to watch that the opposition are good at, where we maybe can exploit them at corners. You've also got to try and keep them fit. So it's very, the training, like every part, just it has to just go. We generally have four sections. There's a warm-up, a cool-down, there'll be a function, a game every week. We do a lot of analysis. We're on an online platform called Naysmith, so we're a little analysis guy. So for example, once we've played a game on a Saturday, say you were my player, you could click on your name and every time you've touched the ball will be up on a Sunday. So you didn't need to go and watch the whole game. You could just go and watch your clips. That's good as well, because if I want to speak to you about something, I'll say to you, listen, watch your clips and come in and see me 20 minutes before training, and I can pick out a couple of clips. He's already seen them, so he's got a rough idea of what I'm going to speak about.
So even if he's at work, he could just have it on his phone?
You can get on your phone, your laptop, anything like that, yeah. Listen, I watched the whole game back, but say if, for example, I thought there was too many crosses coming into our box, I could just click on crosses into our box, and I could just focus on that. So it saves me a lot of time. He works remote, but he's been with me at every club. He's an older guy that sort of made it his own business. He's a plasterer to trade, but he's got 4 or 5 football teams on the go, some rugby teams, and he's made a living out of becoming an analyst, and I've had him with me at every club since I've been at East Fife, really. And he's probably as important as a number 2 if I went into a new club.
Really?
Yeah, because he knows the way I want to work, because we've worked together for 9 or 10 years. Like, I could text him now, even though he's a part-time, and say, listen, I'll just make up a name. Harry Styles.
Yeah.
Listen, Jamie, Harry Styles at Caledonian Braves in the Lowland League. Heard some good reports from him. Could you get me 20 minutes of his clips, please? He'll go away and I'd have that within about an hour.
Really?
Yeah. Or a couple of hours.
Still, that's incredible to have.
Yeah, so things like that is really, really good and really, really helpful.
Did you pick up on some of those things from previous managers, like what you knew you would like and wouldn't like when you got into it? Did you? Because a lot of people say that they learn things from managers, be it good and bad, but from what I've seen, you've had mostly good managers, people that are really respected in the game. Yeah,
and they all work in different ways. You know, my first managerial team, Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown, we never really done too much analysis on the opposition. You know, training was quite structured. We done nearly the same on a Monday. Tuesday at that time was your hard working day. You never really saw the balls. It was a running session in the morning and then a upper body circuit in the afternoon. You got a Wednesday off. Thursday was a function towards the game. Friday was what most teams still do now, a little bit possession, some shooting, small-sided games, and then it would repeat again the next week. So it was very, very struggling. We never done. I can't really remember looking at too many videos when I was at Hearts, really. That sort of came more when we went to Everton.
Do you think it was more because Jim Jeffries' style was about bigging you up, or it's just, what was he like as a manager? Because I've heard a lot of good things, but he sounds like some character. Yeah, but always very kind of planned, everything he did.
Well, listen, to be honest, Billy Brown, his assistant, took the majority of the training. Yeah. And to be fair, that is that's sort of how I've worked as a manager. You have managers that feel, or they want to be on the pitch doing 90% of the training themselves. I've never been like that, and I sometimes wonder why that is. And I think it's because I think it's in my subconscious where at Hearts, Billy Brown, the assistant manager, took 90% of the training. Jim Jeffries maybe took 10. The gaffer, still calling the gaffer now, would stand at the side of the pitch. He would come on and correct things if it wasn't going right. He'd say his opinion. But Billy took the majority of training. When I moved to Everton, it was the exact same. You'd be lucky if Walter Smith took 10 training sessions while I was at Everton. And Archie took the majority of the training. So I don't know if that's maybe something to do how I work, because here at Stenhousemuir and with most of my assistant managers, I let them do the majority. We plan the training together, but I'm quite happy to stand back, watch it. I've got my reasons for that. One of the reasons, listen, if we're doing a tactical thing, of course I'll take it if it's something that we're working on to break down the opposition. But I generally feel if you're taking the training, you can't see everything that's going on. I think it's important to stand back, see who's training well, who's not training well. You can sometimes pick up on that. Is it you're going to have a chat with them? Is there a personal? Is there something wrong with them out with? Because obviously they're only part-time, so you've only got them maybe 6 or 7 hours a week. They've got another life, another job. So I always feel that you can just stand back, still have an input into the training, of course. You help Brown plan it. I do all the analysis for the opposition myself. But in terms of actually training, once we've planned it, I'm quite happy to let Brown take the majority of the training.
Well, you've always had kind of strong assistant managers in your playing career, so you've seen that. But did not David Moyes not do 110% of the training?
Yeah, and that was the first time David Moyes was my first manager where he done everything, or he done 90% and the assistant manager done 10%, so it was a complete reversal. I think obviously now, listening to his interviews and stuff, I think he's obviously delegating a lot more. He brings in 2 or 3 or 4 assistant managers. I think they all have their parts to play. Obviously he'll oversee everything, but I think it'll still matter as much to him, but obviously he's learned to be able to take a step back and trust other people. But I also get why he was like that. He was stepping up for Preston. He wanted to make sure that everything was done properly, methodically. He felt that he wanted to make sure every base was covered, and I understand that as well. You know, I fully understand that after having gone into management as well. And I dare say when I got my first job at East Fife that I probably took more of the training than I've maybe alluded to earlier in the interview. But I found it quite easy to sort of step back and say no, because all the assistant managers that I've had in my managerial career, they've all wanted to be. I've always wanted to be a manager. The assistant managers that I've generally had have always wanted to be coaches. Not too many of them have actually thought they want to be a manager. They want to be in the training pitch with the players, planning sessions, blah blah blah. So that works quite well, because I'm quite happy doing the other side of it, and they're quite happy on taking the training. But as I say, I plan the training with them, and I have a big say into what we're going to do. But I don't feel that I've got to go and take the session.
Well, I don't know, you might remember the story of Archie Knox being Sir Alex's assistant, and Sir Alex used to take all the sessions until Archie Knox said to him, "What am I doing here? What's the point?" And then Archie Knox is someone you ended up having. But do you remember that dynamic between Walter Smith and Archie Knox?
Yeah.
What were they like to work with?
Great. Listen, they were old school, but I liked it because I'd came for that for Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown, and both sets of management there were very similar. If you played bad, they let you know. If you played good, they let you know. But once they said their piece, it was over and done with. So if you got to turn off on the Saturday and you were in on the Sunday for a cool down, it was forgotten about. And I quite liked that. I quite liked the straightforward, the no lies, telling you if you've done well, telling you if you've not done well and expect better. I quite liked that. And I've tried to sort of be like that with the players. You know, I think if you speak to any of the players that I've managed, I think most of them would say that I never really tell them lies. You know, I'll try to be upfront with them, and sometimes they'll come and say to you and say why, and they want to come and see and say why have I not been picked or why was I not playing. They might not like the answer that they actually get, but I try and be honest with it, because I appreciated that in my career. You know, I had a couple of times in my career where you sort of knew you were just getting told what they wanted you to hear rather than the actual truth, whereas I would rather have just got told the truth and dealt with that myself. So I've always tried to be that. But no, listen, Archie was great.
Do you remember a time when you did get pulled up? Like, do you have a specific memory?
Yeah, I do. I remember him once in training. He was basically just saying to me that he pulled me up because he didn't think I was training properly. And he was basically saying you have to train how you're going to play.
Was he right, do you think, at the time?
I can't actually remember exactly what it was, but I don't think he would have said it for no reason. So probably he was right. But listen, I got on great with Archie. I think all my managers know I would have ran through a brick wall for them. Walter and Archie were really, really good with me because I was just a young boy. I was still only I was only 20 when I moved down. I had a daughter. I was married. We got married young. I had a daughter, but we had a really young family. Sort of looked after me a little bit along with Big Davy Weir. He was already down there. I'd played with him at Hearts. I'd roomed with him at Hearts, Scotland. So that helped to have a friendly face there. But they looked after me. Still kept in touch with Archie. He was the assistant manager to Craig Brown at Scotland. When I was without a club, him and Craig Brown took me up to Aberdeen for a year. And one of the biggest compliments I got Archie's book, and they asked him to pick his greatest 11 players, and he said it was too difficult because of the players he had managed, but he gave 50 players, and I was one of the 50 players.
Really?
So when you actually think of the players that he's managed at Man United, at Rangers and stuff like that, for me to be mentioned in those 50 players, it was a compliment.
Yeah. No, that is an incredible achievement. The thing you mentioned about growing up and having these people around you, so you at Hearts had, for example, David Weir, Craig Levine. At Everton, you said these people kind of help you grow. It sounds like as you're coming up as one of the rising stars of Scottish football, you always have a strong support structure around you. But that includes like your family and neighbours, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it started, listen, my dad was a coalman. He was a butcher to trade, then he was a coalman, and then by the time I started really training on a regular basis with senior clubs, and listen, I was training every night of the week. I can't remember the exact order, but maybe it was Monday Dundee United, Tuesday Hibs, Wednesday my boys club, Thursday Rangers, Friday Hearts, Saturday with the school, or Friday with the primary school, and then senior school on the Saturday. You maybe got a Sunday off, and then it went again. I was flying maybe once a month when I got to about 13 or 14. Chelsea were flying me up and down once a month to play with their team. So I was out training. But obviously my dad became a long distance lorry driver. My mum didn't drive. She was like a home help, so I relied on uncles, cousins, friends of the family to get me to all these training sessions, to get me to games. You know, mum and dad saw some games as I was growing up at boys club level, but they never seen a lot because my dad would be out maybe driving to Southampton or London or something like that. So he missed a lot of my football growing up, and my mum did as well. But I don't think that was a bad thing either, because I never had pushy parents.
Yeah.
So they were. I see it. Parents at the side of the pitch now shouting on constantly. I never had that. I just used to go away on a Saturday, play,
They trusted
go
you.
and train, and and the only ones, you know, even when they did take me, they didn't need to stay and watch me or anything like that. So they just let me go on with it, which I'm very similar with my children when they were playing. My daughter still plays now for Bother Grows Ladies. I just stand in the corner, never really shout on, I never really get involved. I think that's the way it should be when you're a parent. So I had that support to get me to and from training. Obviously, when I went into Hearts, you went in as a ground staff YTS. If I was in the first year, there would maybe be another 6 or 7, and there'd also be maybe 6 or 7 second years. So that was like 14, as you call the YTS ground staff at that time. Then you had an actual like reserve team. So Miles, who's here, like the goalie coach, a couple of years older than me, he was in the reserve team.
So people you know him from then?
Yeah, so Miles, people like Alan McManus, who's at St Mirren now, Paul Ritchie. So there was maybe 12 or 14 in that group, and then there was the actual first team of 20. So when I got into Hearts as leaving school, there was 40 full-time football players there. So you work your way through, and the whole time that you're working your way through, in that first team, we had really seasoned, good professionals that showed you what you had to do. Gary Mackay, John Robertson, John Colquhoun, Craig Levine. Slightly later, Neil Poynton came up for England, whose position I eventually took, but he was brilliant. Even when I was playing in front of him, he couldn't help me enough.
Really, he was just guiding you through?
Guiding me the whole way. So I always had these senior figures to help me. So I had a strong family that would make sure I could get to training and stuff. And then when I eventually decided Hearts was the team that I was going to go with, I had really senior players. And then I had good management that looked after me, and good coaches. You know, even before I got into Hearts first team, I had Peter Houston as a youth coach, Walter Kidd, Paul Hegarty. These had all played at a good level. So you were always learning good habits for the coaches, for the senior players, and then obviously for the management once I got into the first team. And then when I went to Everton, I had another good management team. I already knew like Big Davy Weir helped me out. And when you went into that change room, it was an even higher level of players. So when I walked in there, you had Paul Gascoigne, David Weir, Mark Hughes, Richard Gough, Duncan Ferguson, Kevin Campbell, real senior players, so then you learn things for them. I never really learned about lifting weights and stuff, for example, until I went to Everton. We'd done it at Hearts, but we had a very limited gym where it was all sort of like your body weights, like pull-ups, dips, press-ups, stomachs, speedball. That's all we really done. I remember going into Everton, and then senior player there at the time, Dave Watson, who was right at the very end of his career, just taking me to the side one day, showing me how to actually not be swaying when you're doing bicep curls and getting your back right and all your posture and everything.
Just little things.
Just little things like that. That's all. I'm very, very lucky in my career that I always had either coaches or players that I could learn from, and I would have been silly not to do that. So I always say that. I was a good player growing up. I wasn't the best player. I wasn't the most talked about player. But I would say I was one of the hardest working players. And I sort of took that into my... If you the fans, it would... If you spoke to the Everton fans, for example, they'd probably say a good, honest professional.
Or they would call you El Blanco Carlos.
I don't know who put that up, but I got a lot of injuries at Everton. I still believe if I hadn't got the injuries, I could maybe have stepped up again. But I just had 3 or 4 injuries that kept me out for maybe 6 months at a time, and I never really got back to being the same player that I wanted to be.
And even though you have all these injuries, you still manage 46, I think it is, Scotland caps.
Yeah,
which is still an incredible achievement for even the best of players.
But I'm proud of that. But it's also one of my biggest regrets that I never got to 50 caps to get into the Hall of Fame. I think I'd pulled out so many squads with injury. Now, bearing in mind, every time that I went along, I nearly got capped. And I think it was somebody done something where I was about 27 or 28, I can't remember exactly, and I was on about 40 caps, and I'd pulled out of about 30 squads.
Yeah. Which are usually 1 or 2 caps, at least a squad.
Yeah, so, but what I could honestly say is I never ever missed a game. To my memory, I never missed a game for Scotland and then played for my club on the Saturday.
Which was at the time,
it didn't sit right with me, no, it didn't sit right. Listen, there may have been an occasional game where it was a really important game and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be fit. I don't think there was actually, but I can't remember missing a game for Scotland and then going and playing for, majority of my caps were earned at Everton, going and playing for Everton. But what I am proud of is I got 46 caps and 45 of them were starts. They weren't just a 5-minute, listen, a cap's a cap, but I was playing the majority of the games for the start.
What so many managers thought of you, because you had some big ones. But I wanted to, because I mentioned briefly earlier, my first ever 3 games in a stadium, Scotland-France, Scotland-Ukraine, Scotland-Italy, and I hadn't realised that you'd played in 2 of those. Do you remember that 2008 Euros campaign?
Yeah, I do. The Ukraine game that we won at home, I was marking Shevchenko at a corner and he scored, so that was my fault. So I remember that for that reason. And the Italy game where we had to win to qualify was a 5 o'clock kick-off. So obviously all the pubs and that had opened early, everybody's in good spirits, but standing there singing the national anthem, I had maybe 20 or 30 tickets and I could see my mum, my dad, my sister, my wife. I think I get mixed up, 1 or 2 of my children, my mother-in-law, father-in-law and other friends and that. I could see them all as I was singing it. But that was the best atmosphere that I played in. Without doubt, been lucky enough to play at some big stadiums, but that night at Hampden, the 5 o'clock kick-off, I think it was raining, just everything about it, it was just an incredible atmosphere.
Against the world champions as well.
Yeah, and listen, it was 1-1 and we were pushing because we knew I had to win. I think well documented there was a foul given against us. It was never a foul, and before you know it, we were out. I think we finished 3rd, but that was some group. I think France, Italy, and Ukraine had all finished in the quarterfinals or better of the tournament previously.
Well, France were finalists.
So no, probably summed up my sort of Scotland career. So close to getting to a tournament and so far, and that's really. Three regrets: not getting 50 caps, not qualifying for a major tournament, and the amount of injuries that I picked up.
none of them really your fault is the kind of... But
No,
that's
no, you
that's
know,
the sign of a good career, I feel.
it just listen, injuries happen. You get
Yeah.
certain players just get more injuries than others, and unfortunately, I was one of those players. It would have been, but you know, I felt that when I could get a run of games, I could, whatever club I was at, I felt confident that I was going to make the position my own.
There was a player I wanted to ask about, and he's an interesting player to me. It's Duncan Ferguson, because a lot of what gets said about him is always the headlines and the time spent in prison. But everyone that I know who speaks about Duncan Ferguson speaks about him as one of the nicest people in football, and I think that goes for a lot of people in that Everton squad. Do you remember kind of what it was like when you came to the club? Because he was one of the Scots who...
Very, very quiet when I first... Listen, he was quite a quiet character anyway, but very, very quiet when I first joined. Just hello and you okay, and just politeness, just very, very quiet. And then I sort of got starting to speak to him about a bit. We had a common interest in pigeons, because my papa used to have pigeons.
Like racing pigeons?
Yeah, racing pigeons, and so did Duncan. So when I was younger, to get a little bit of pocket money, I would go down to my... You know, one of these like Silver Cross prams that you get? My papa took like the top off. So, and he would put his pigeons into the basket that he wanted racing, and I would walk them from his house round to the pigeon club in Lone Head where I was grew up, and they would get clocked in and taken away to race. And I would get, so I had like an interest, and then on the Saturday when they were coming back for the race, I'd be there and I'd be watching them, trying to get them into the dugout, to try and get them in, to get the tag off, to clock how long it takes. So I had a bit of an interest. Duncan obviously, well known that he's got a love for pigeons, spent a lot of money on some pigeons. So we would generally speak about that. And then he became like a teammate. And I used to always ask that about him, why were you so quiet when I asked? He says, he just really likes sussing everybody out. You know, it just sort of, you know, gets a feel for them before he really opens up. But a very, very quiet man, very, very private. I don't think he had a mobile phone. That, well, he certainly never gave his mobile phone out. You know, here, the players are all in a group chat. If that had been at the time, I don't think Duncan would have put his phone number into it. Like to come in, do his work. Really good professional. Another one that was very, very unfortunate with injuries, and probably never helped himself, because we're trying to help the team so much in his career. Played in games injured that he shouldn't have played in.
Just ran himself into the ground.
Like he'd maybe have an injury that was a couple of weeks that he should maybe have missed, and he'd play to try and help a manager out of that, and then that couple of week injury would turn into a 6-week or an 8-week injury. Very, very good for such a big lad. His touch was one of the best that I played with. When we done the boxes at the start, and he would test you out in the boxes, he would fire the passes in to see how your touch was like. It was like he was testing you out as a player. And that's how he would test you. He'd fire the pass in to make sure that you could control it and stuff like that. But his touch was exceptional. No, I've not really got one bad thing to say about him, really. I think he was very, very unfortunate with the amount of injuries that he had. But I also think that he got those injuries by trying to help his team or his managers.
And so, these managers that you've had, what do you think is the thing you took from them that you carried on into management? Is there something that stuck with you that maybe, if you hadn't met them, that you never would have had?
Just little bits and bobs for everything, you know. You spoke about how Jim Jeffries was sort of straight down the middle. Walter was like that as well, and Archie, but I also liked the Walter. It wouldn't matter Walter how the result went on a Saturday. When he came in on a Monday at the training ground, he would know all the office staffs, obviously knew their names, but he'd know their partners' names, and what did you get up to at the weekend, did you have a nice weekend? So I tried to remember things like that, that although you can lose and you're hurting, and you definitely hurt more as a manager than you ever did as a player. I can tell you that for a fact. You hurt a lot more as a manager. You've also got to remember that we have a lot of volunteers at Stenhousemuir, for example. You have to remember they're giving up their time to try and help you. So you've got to, you know, just things like that, little things like that. David Moyes more on the tactical side. As I went on record numerous times saying he's the best tactical manager I played under.
Completely, I think, underappreciated. Every time he's left a club, he's always gone to another one and done incredibly well, and I think you show with West Ham how much they've missed him twice. Yeah,
not listen, we were very organised, each player knew what they were, and I say, people ask me when I go for a job interview that, I say, have you got a philosophy? And I say, well, not really. I says, but the team's got to be fit, organised, hard working. I says, if that's a philosophy, then I've got a philosophy. I says, if it's not a philosophy, then I've not got a philosophy, but that's what the team's going to be. And if you actually root through my managerial, the clubs that I've managed, they've had those traits. They are organised, they do know what they're doing. we're hard to beat. You know, if you look at Stenhousemuir just now, somebody actually said it to me the other day, in our last 66 league games we've had 30 clean sheets, which is phenomenal for a part-time club.
Yeah.
So it's because the players are organised, hard-working and know what they're expected to do.
Is that what it was like when you came in? Because you come in, I think Stenhousemuir were 8th in the league, and then within a season and a half they're top by some distance. Like, how do you get a club to change like that, especially a part-time one?
So generally, for the outside looking in, you sort of knew in League Two that Stenhousemuir had one of the better budgets, so you always knew you'd have a chance. If you could get that job, you would have a chance. I think so. I came in, I think it was January, and that core of that group had probably been together. That was 2.5 years. So they'd been together 1 year, never just made it into the playoffs. Second year, never just made it into the playoffs. And when we came in, they were 8th, and there was a little bit of fear that they were maybe going to become Club 42 and end up in that, and that would have been a disaster for the club. And we were sort of not too much pressure put on us with the board at that time, but we were made aware of that. Like, listen, we can't finish Club 42. So we got in, we got a couple of results for the 18 game. We actually came in sort of right on that 18 game. We had played the 18th game and we had 18 games to take over. We won 7, drew 6, lost 5. So we got a response. We missed out in the playoffs again. So that group, although there was really good players, there was just something missing to get them over the line. So we made a real brave decision, and we actually only kept 6 players. So and listen, there were some tough decisions, but we just felt that the group needed a new chemistry, that players had maybe been here too long and just failed to get in. But I have to say it again, there was some good players here. There was nothing wrong with them as individuals or that. They just couldn't go over the line as a group. So we, obviously with my previous experiences in League Two, I sort of knew what we needed. We wanted to have roughly an 18-man squad. We didn't want to have like just 12 players and then the other 6 were just like jersey fillers. Yeah. We wanted everybody to be able to contribute, and we wanted to build a team that was solid right through the middle of the team, where I know in League Two some games you've got to go and stand up and be counted. You have to make sure you're not bullied. Yeah. So we, you know, if you look at for the majority of that game, we had Darren, over 6 foot in the goals, played at a higher level. Gregor and Nicky Jamieson, 6'3", both of them. And as a centre-half partnership, between the two of them, they can do everything. One's quick, one's good in the ball, one likes to tackle, both of them are good in the air. So they had that. The middle, we had Mikey Anderson and Nat Wedderburn. Nat again, 6'1", big strong boy. And the centre forward was Matt Aiken, 6'3". So so the spine was strong if we needed it to be. But then we also made sure that everybody at the front end of the pitch, from the middle to the front, could run. Yeah. So we never, although we were getting some good players put to us, we never signed anybody that didn't have pace, that wasn't energetic. Yeah. And that, when you sign 12, 13, 14 players, it's a little bit of a risk, because you don't know how quickly they're going to gel on the pitch, you don't know how quickly they're going to gel in the changing room. We done a lot of scouting. We signed Ross Taylor, who's just signed an extension there. We went at Auchinleck, so that's the West of Scotland League, so that's 2 leagues below League Two at the time.
It's junior, weren't
they? Yeah, like they were a junior team, but West of Scotland, so 2 leagues below, 2 leagues below what we were playing in. Saw something, liked him. Ross Meekin was playing at that level as well, albeit Ross had played for Forfar and stuff. So we sort of knew he was tried and tested. Jordan Kirkpatrick was in that league as well, but we knew he was tried and tested. Then I was on holiday. Brown and Martin, the head of recruitment, went to the exit trials, and they said the best player here is a left back. He's been released from here. So we asked him to get in Kinley, who has been with us. He's nearly been an ever-present since he's been here in the 2 years. The story about Kinley is he came, I hadn't seen him, phoned him, he says, well, I've been approached by Stranraer. I'll give you my word, I'll go and train with them for a week, and then I'll come and train with you for a week. He came in one training session. I said to the board, you need to give him a contract. I said, I don't need to see him for the rest of the week. I said, I've seen enough. Yeah, left
what
back.
What is it that you've seen him on?
Well, that position's a wee bit. It's just his technique. He's tenacious. We've played him. Kinley's 5'7". I've played him centre half this season against 6'4". He's got the best leap in the air at the club. He jumps the biggest. What I mean is, Kinley might be 5'7", maybe jump 6'3".
Yeah.
A 6'3" might only jump 6'6".
Yeah.
He's got the biggest distance that he actually jumps. He's just his determination. Just saw something. No, we're not going to get better than that.
Yeah.
But you're not sure how they're all got to gel.
Yeah.
What actually happened was we'd done our pre-season. The club at the last minute got an invite to go to Jersey, an overnight stay, fly in, play the game, come home the next day.
Yeah.
We got a night out. That night out was really, really important. We went out for a meal. All the new players sang. I got up and sang. We had a night out.
What did you sing?
Something that would have joined in, Sweet Caroline, or something that the players would have joined in. Everybody sang. The board were there at the time. They were getting to know the new players coming in. The board sat, we had a good meal, good few drinks. We went out at night together. A few things happened that shouldn't have happened on the trip, but it actually brought the club, everybody together. And away we went. And I think we actually started off with maybe a draw and a draw, something like that. And then maybe I can't actually, but we really hit form. We beat Peterhead out here one night. Adam Brown scored a world-class goal. And we just kicked on for there, and I think we went on and won 12 games in a row. And they always, if we had and we sometimes had a bad result. We got beat with Brora Rangers in the Cup. We bounced back with a victory next week. We got beat 6-1 here with Clyde. We played really well for 30 minutes. It was 0-0, and at the end of the game it was 6-1 to Clyde. And Clyde were bottom of the league at the time. And we were top, and we're thinking, wow, what's happened there? But then the next week the lads went to Bonnyrigg and won. And that game when we went to Bonnyrigg won was sort of when I knew we were going to win the league.
Really?
Yeah, because we were points in front. All the teams had to play each other. The lads were just such in a rich vein of form that I thought we ain't going to slip up. So that was a game where if somebody says, was there ever a moment, it was that moment at Bonnyrigg when we went. And Bonnyrig's a tough place to go. It's heavy, the pitch is on a slope. You have to really play in the air. A game where you need that spine of the team. And we got a goal and we beat them 1-0 on the back of losing 6-1, and that's where I thought, no, we're going to go close to winning the league here.
But did you know that you would come close to winning the league the next season? Like, I think when you get promoted, there's an expectation of just survive, but you're now up in the playoffs.
Well, listen, you sometimes lose sight of teams that you've managed, so I don't say this lightly, but that group was the best group that I managed, just the closeness in the changing room. They would go out themselves on a Sunday together. They were just such a really close group. And that played a big part in last season and winning it. And then when we went up, the budget didn't go up a lot. So you're still sort of looking at the same sort of players, the budget for the same sort of players. You know, it wasn't like the board was saying, listen, you've won League 2, you've got to League 1 now, so your average wage can go from £200 a week to £400 a week. It wasn't going to be like that where you started looking at players at a different level. So very quickly in that season, maybe from January on, I think it got to about maybe February, March, we already had 12 or 14 of them signed up to go again this season, knowing that we were going to be in League 1. And that's where I had to make a call. Are these players going to be able to take us forward in League 1? You think they are? And I pre-warned the boards. I said, look, we maybe got 14 of them signed up. We might find out that 10 can, and 4 as we play the games, we might need to move on in January because they've not been able to move. But they all have stepped up. So we got the majority of them right. Did I think we would be where we are? Probably not. But I also did say that on paper, I didn't think there was an outstanding team. And what I mean by that, like a Falkirk last year that went undefeated. There wasn't like a big, in previous years in League 1 where like Queen's Park came through the league, they had a lot of money behind them. They had players like Simon Murray and that. So there wasn't one of those. So what I said was, let me play every team once and then I'll have a better idea where we're going to be. Yeah. Once we had played everybody once, I knew that if we played to our best, not many teams would beat us.
Yeah.
It was then trying to get the consistency. Now, we've had the consistency in terms of the results, in terms of we've not really lost 2 or 3 games in a row. But the competitiveness of the league, we've still lost 9 games.
Yeah.
You know, so we've still lost a third of our games nearly. But where we've done really well, touch wood, so far is we've never went 5 or 6 games without winning a game. And that goes back to the group last year. Whenever they had a setback, they bounced back the next game. And we've generally done that this season. I think we've lost 2 games in a row, twice.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite good.
That's quite rare in the league where it's quite like it's cutthroat.
It is cutthroat because if you're not at it, you'll get beat.
Yeah.
It's simple. We were off at against Cove maybe 7 or 8 games ago, got beat 4-0 out there. We're okay the first 20, 30 minutes, gave away a couple of bad goals, then Cove battered us. You go away, have to analyse, right, what we're doing, was a change in the formation too much, blah, blah, blah. You go away and say, right, for the next 2 or 3 games, I'm going to stick with this. You tell the players that. Went out and won the next 5 games in a row. So the lads lost 3-0 at Dunfermline in the Cup, 4-0 at home to in Cove in the league, and then went and won the next 5 games.
And now you're drawn with Cove 0-0, which shows like
and
how close you
up there at Cove, you know, we beat them and we've drew with them. Over the course of the 12 points available against Cove, we've took 7 out of 12. We've played Arbroath 3 times so far, we've took 6 out of 9. So we know on our day that we can beat these teams, but we also know if we're off it that they'll beat us. But that goes for as well as Dumbarton or Annan, the 2 teams at the bottom just now. If you're not at it, they'll beat you. If they're at it and you're not at it, you'll get beat. And that's what I thought the league was going to be like. Did I think we'd have the consistency to be sitting third? Probably not. Probably not. But I never ever said 8th. But we're also realistic. We've now went from maybe League 2 to having the second or third biggest budget.
Yeah.
We've probably got the second or third lowest budget now. So in terms of that, they generally say the levels that sell out, we're overachieving.
Yeah.
But the players didn't think they're overachieving, and that's the biggest thing in it, because they think they can.
Well, they've shown that. But so the thing I want to know is, what are you worried about players getting poached? Because everyone's shown that they're good, and if your budget stays the same, how do you avoid staying where you are if you're trying to push the team up? It's quite a difficult thing to say, but like,
yeah, because
you're an ambitious
because
manager and an ambitious
we've got 10, we've got 11 or 12. Well, we just signed Ross, so I think we've got out the current group we've got 11 signed for next season. But listen, it not just my club. If your budget stays the same and you want to keep the same players, but they've done well, and they all want a little bit more money, something's got to give. You know, because if something's got to give. But listen, we work very, very closely. We've got a football working group here, the head of football operations, Martin Christie. This club is very, very forward thinking. Yeah. They've got a head of football. We at any given time can have 12 scouts out on a Saturday watching games at all different levels. That's so, and the one that they don't really need to go and watch is the team that we're going to play, because I want to watch. I'll watch the team that we're going to play next. I'll watch their 2 previous games fully. So I like to do all of that myself. So, but we'll have scouts at the West of Scotland, East of Scotland, Lowland League, League 2, Championship. It's not the same scouts are out every week, but we've got a database of thousands of players that will have reports. And then if a certain player keeps getting flagged up, it'll go to Martin Christie, the head of recruitment. He'll go and watch them. And then if he sees something, he'll say, listen, you need to go and watch him. So we're very, very forward thinking that way for a part-time club. We work closely with the board about the budget. I treat the budget like it's my own money. I don't like wasting money. I think some people will be amazed at some of the quality that we've got, the value that we've got for money. I think there's an outside... I think people outside of the club think that we're paying people £400 and £500 a week, and miles away for that. Like miles away for that. Yeah. But the players are fit and they work hard. We're a very, very fit group. You know, we train Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So I'm trying to think maybe who was top last week. 2 training sessions in a game. I think Michael Anderson ran something like 27 kilometres last week. So we're a fit team. Yeah. We're a fit team. We're as fit as any of the full-time teams in the league.
Which is so difficult with the amount of training sessions.
But again, it has to go to your recruitments. Yeah. Not every manager will be like that. I want, you have to be able to run. Yeah. At the front end of the pitch, you've got to be able to run. You know, at the back, yes, sometimes you have a wee bit more experience. They're just not as quick. Yeah. You go through every player. Our 2 main strikers, Corey and Matt Aiken, both over 6 foot, both can run. Yeah, which is, it's not often that you get someone who can do both. Our 4 wingers are really, really quick. Yeah. Scott Tomlinson on loan for Ayr, Bobby McCluskey on loan for Hearts, Ewan and Ross Taylor, really, really quick, and all really, really fit. And then, you know, you work with certain players like Mikey Anderson, for example. Since I've came into the club, he's hardly ever been at the team. When we came in, he was one that players are saying, oh, he's not good enough. You need to, people were saying you need to move him on, stuff like that. We watched him in training, showed a really good attitude. I don't know if he started my first game or my second game, but he got in quite quickly. He's never been at the team since, and he's now, through his performances, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. So he's, and people say, well, what have you done with Mikey? Nothing. Just played him. When he had a bad game, let him stay in the team and try and play through. Make sure he didn't have another bad game. Give him a few wee pointers. People were saying, for example, that when we came in, that they didn't know if Nat could do it. Looked at how Nat was playing. The previous manager had Nat dropping into the back four to get the ball. Then when the ball went forward quickly and it broke at the edge of the opposition box, Nat was still 20 yards away. I said, well, nobody can get from there to there. And we want to go forward quickly, no direct, but the first thing we get when we get the ball, we want to see, can we go forward? So we just say to Nat, don't go and play as deep. Just play as a midfielder, don't go into the back line, play as a midfielder. Lo and behold, Nat's up in the second balls. Everybody thinks you've done something magical. You've not. You just said, didn't run back 20 yards to get the ball. Just play as a midfielder, and then you'll be able to get up and get the second balls. Nobody can go from that box to that box as quick as the ball's travelling. No. So he's got an impossible task. And Nat played, listen, Scott McGill's came in and played a wee bit here towards the last 10 games, but for when we came in, Nat played nearly two season and a half non-stop.
The thing I wanted to know about is just more briefly about the Scottish game, and you're someone who's in it, and you've known it since you were forever. Do you have any things that you'd like to see improved? Any kind of, not necessarily gripes, but a way to kind of progress the game in Scotland, something that you would like to see as a manager and maybe even as a fan?
Do you know something? I understand that times moved on a little bit. You know what was brilliant for me growing up as a younger player that helped my development was when you got into a senior club, you played reserve football. So, so for example, when I was 17, if Hearts were playing Celtic at Tynecastle at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, we played Celtic reserves at 12 o'clock on a Saturday at Parkhead. So you're playing it there, you're playing with senior players that are maybe coming back for injury, they're not on the first team squad, but you're also playing against the same. So you could be playing against, I remember as a young boy at Hearts reserves, playing against Rangers reserves, playing against Kinchelskis. Well, how can you get any better grounding than that? I just sometimes think they're too protected, and I think there needs to be something better to prepare the young players for at the senior clubs to go into men's senior football. There needs to be a bridge.
Well, because you're getting players who are getting exposed to first team football now, they're 20 or 21, which is, you made your debut against Celtic at 17, so that's like 3 or 4 years of football that you have over a lot of players coming through.
Yeah, listen, I think for me, if you I understand that clubs need to work on them with certain things, but I think the best thing is just to get them out and playing at a level. You know, if they're 17, 18 and they're good and they've got a chance, but they're not just ready for your first team, put them out to play at a level. Is it Championship level? Is it League One? Is it just to get them out and play? I sometimes feel that clubs with younger players, they keep them in the building too long, and when they eventually actually say, oh listen, we're maybe going to let them go now, you're like, well, we've already built our squad. You know, I feel like the younger players could go out on loan, especially out to experience football a bit earlier in their careers. I think it'll help them.
Have you ever had a player from a big club come in who's a very highly touted prospect, but you've gone, they're so far off it, not technically, but just because they've not experienced that?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult for them. When you take players in for full-time senior clubs, them getting used to training at night and stuff like that, you can see them maybe struggling to... And the other one where you see the real big struggle is when a player's he's been released from a full-time club at 19, and he has to go part-time, they struggle at the start. because they're that used to training every day, and then they've got to try and get into their new way of life. They've got to go and try and get a job.
Yeah.
Then they've got to, for their job, they've got to come training, and you can actually see in it, we're always conscious just to make sure that if we have a player like that, that you're sort of looking out for them a little bit extra, because it can be difficult, that really difficult, because they're in a completely different way of life for what they were used to. So, yeah, I'd like to just get younger players playing earlier. To sum up your question, really, get younger players out playing earlier to bridge the gap so that they can get into the first teams quicker. Because as you say, when I grew up, if you were good enough at 17 or 18, you played in the first team.
Yeah.
You weren't playing like in your under 18s or your under 20s. You were in, and I definitely think we protect them a little bit too much. Where I think the best way for them to learn is just to go out and play senior football.
Now I'm going to be cheeky here. I'm going to ask one more question. Best player you ever played with and why?
See, that's difficult. No doubt the best player I ever played with would be Paul Gascoigne, but I never played with him at his best.
Yeah. But you still saw.
Yeah, I seen bits and bobs, but I never seen it on a regular basis. You know, I never seen it like the England players would have seen or the Rangers players would have seen. That's a really difficult question.
If you had to take one of them.
Wayne Rooney.
Really, if you
Wayne Rooney.
What he just because he.
Yeah, just because at 16 he just came in and he just looked at him like, wow.
You knew immediately.
Yeah, immediately he just knew. He just came in, fitted in straight away. He had the body of a 22-year-old at 16, strong, powerful, quick, raw, unfazed, everything you wanted, and no surprise there that he went to Man United and go and have the career that he actually had. So no, I was thinking about that there, but hands down it'd be Wayne Rooney.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Cheers.
Thank you so
no
much.
worries.